What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hoopers Lounge with Max and myself. Today, we presented ourselves with a bit of a challenge. We could rank the top 20 players right now and have a kind of consensus top 20. But to make it more difficult, we are trying to rank the top 20 players 5 years from now. In the year 2031, a brand new day, who will the faces of the league be? Which superstars will still be elite? Which new faces will rise up to the top? And which stars now will have a difficult aging process and maybe fall out of the top 20 in 5 years? That's what Max and I are here today trying to predict. There are a lot of factors to consider. I listed a couple: potential, your injury, your team success, and just how much belief you have in this individual player's game to age well, right? That there's a lot of different criteria we could use, and truthfully, it's impossible to predict the future. There's going to be players that rise up in the next 5 years that nobody would ever predict. So this, we're going to say on the record, it's going to be wrong. But if any of them are right, major bonus points to us. So that's what we're here doing: top 20 players in 5 years. Max, do you have anything to say?
No, I just want to. Well, actually, I do. I just want to say that this was a hard list to make, and I had to make it like three different times because I forgot a couple guys. And as I go through them, I'll tell you who I forgot on my first and second run through. But I feel pretty good about my list. I think kind of a spoiler. I think a lot of the current stars' games will translate to their older years, similar to what we've seen in the past generation of LeBron, Steph, KD, Kawhi. Like those guys' games all translated to their early 30s, mid 30s, and I don't think like the stars of today's game will have a problem kind of replicating that success. But I'm excited to see where your list is because um, this was again, like I said, extremely difficult, and there's a million different ways you could have gone.
I gotta say, hearing what you said, I went towards more of a youth movement because I look at guys like Russ, like Harden, like the Mar DeRozan, whose games didn't age well into their 30s. And to me, I think that bodes well for the younger guys, especially with how talented the recent draft classes have been. But I'm excited to get into it. So without further ado, Axe, a start from the bottom, work our way to the top. Let's hear your bottom three or four. Oh, bottom. I say
All
20
right,
through
so
16.
yeah, so um, I would say anywhere on my list from 20 to 12, I listed as an all star slash all NBA caliber player in 5 years, right? Wherever you want to rank them across that spectrum. So at number 20, I have Stefan Castle. Um, I think that just what we saw this past year. From a defensive perspective, he's already amazing for his position. Offensively, he's going to improve, and I just think he's a winner, and I think that matters on top 20 lists. Like guys that win are going to be looked at as maybe better than like their talent would say. So I have Castle at 20. 19, I have LaMelo Ball. I think in 5 years we're going to be looking at LaMelo Ball as like a repeat All Star, like year in and year out. And I think he's right there with Castle in like that A minus to B plus tier of guards. And I really think this change of scenery is going to help his career. So I have LaMelo Ball at 18 or 19, excuse me, and then 18. I'll just go through my bottom three. This is my only 2026 rookie. I have one on the list,
Wow.
and at 18,
Wow.
I have AJ Debanza. I think he's the best player in this draft class, and I think in 5 years you will see that. So I have him at 18, right above Lamelo and Castle. Again, like I said, this list was impossible. Darren Peterson, Acuff, Boozer, like so many guys. But when you look at my list, like everyone on here, I think will be better than those guys in 5 years, which is crazy because the league is stacked. Um, like I texted you earlier, the league's stacked. So my bottom three is Castle at 20, LaMelo at 19, and then AJ Debanza at 18. And that's a total just swing on a high upside guy who we could be looking at him as, one of the better two-way forwards in the NBA in 5 years. So that's kind of my bottom three.
Only one in the 2026 class. I gotta ask. Cade is going into year five. Ant is going into year 6, and they're screwed top 20. These are top 5 players, arguably. So you don't think anybody in the class of 2026 going into year 5 can hit those same heights?
I think they can. I'm just not predicting them to do that. I'm not saying they can't.
Okay,
Like
that's fair.
a lot of guys have the talent to do that. Like we already mentioned, the honorable mentions on these lists are insane. So I'm not saying they can't, but when I look at guys above them, I'm more confident in them to reach their ceiling. I think based on either what I've seen in the NBA or what I think I will see in the next 5 years for younger guys. And some of these names I think you're going to scratch your head at for sure, but I just have more confidence in them than I do in a rookie that I've never seen play in the NBA. And I think that was kind of my mindset. Me kind of trending to not the older players, but the players that are like either entering their prime or currently in their prime. I think I still would take them in 5 years over a guy I've never seen play. I think that's just how my mind works. So I'm not saying they can't. I'm definitely not saying that. Like Cam Boozer could win league MVP in 7 years. Like, I'm not saying he can't do that, but I'm just not predicting that to happen.
Yeah, it's a bold prediction to say a player who's never played a single NBA minute will be an all-star 5 years from now. It's bold, but I don't know. I guess I'm just surprised with the talent that we've talked about this draft class that you would only have one. I have significantly more than one, and I was right. I think I've undergone a little bit more of a youth movement than you have. But I'll rattle off my bottom 3 right now. At 20, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis will be 36, so probably not starting well on the younger side. But at 36-year-old Giannis, he is the oldest player that I have in this top 20, but he should presumably be the number 1 option on the Heat for the next half decade. And I'm just a Giannis fan. I think even when athleticism declines, his skill set and his ball IQ has grown enough to where he'll be able to make an impact. And this is a former championship winner, so just his veteran presence in locker rooms will be helpful to some extent. I don't know. Maybe this is some bias, but I don't want to see a world where Giannis isn't a top 20 player. He's my favorite basketball player ever. And I do think his skill set will at least making him an all-star as his career is beginning to wind down. 19, I have VJ Edgecombe. And I have talked about how high I am on VJ Edgecombe. And I got to say, the only reason I don't have VJ Edgecombe higher is because there's no clear path to him being a number 1 option on at least the Sixers in the next few years with Tyrese Maxey and Jaylen Brown and Joel Embiid when Joel Embiid is healthy. So if Maxey leaves if Edgecombe leaves the Sixers for whatever reason in the next 5 years and goes to a team where he has more offensive responsibility, he could shoot up this list because I think he is that talented as a guard. I compared him to Dwayne Wade. He is a freak athlete who creates explosive highlights on both ends of the ball. He averaged 16, 6, and 4 in his rookie year. And the main question about Edgecombe coming into the league was his shooting, and he silenced that by going 35% from 3 his rookie year. That's not an elite number by any means, but that's not a weakness. That's something you have to respect in the NBA. And that's only going to get better as he ages. So I have Edgecombe at 19. And at 18, my first member of the 2026 class, Darius Acuff Jr. Now, this was one I was going back and forth on, including Acuff this high, because we've gone over the pros and cons of Acuff. He's an incredible baller offensively, but he's piss poor defensively. I mean, you could make a case that Acuff might step into the league as the worst defender in the NBA. And I don't know if you watched Darius Acuff over Summer League, but his defensive highlights attest to that. I mean, Darius Acuff was exactly what he was advertised to be in the Summer League. A great offensive weapon for the Kings, but wow, his defensive lapses were bad. They were really bad. But looking at a player like that, a 19-year-old who is strong offensively and not good defensively, what's stopping Acuff from being Tyrese Maxey 5 years from now? A strong offensive player and a weak defensive player, right? I think that is pretty much what Maxey is. I think Darius Acuff could very well replicate Tyrese Maxey's skill set and offensive ability 5 years from now. Maybe it's anything better than Maxey defensively, which is a pretty low bar to clear, then yeah, Acuff is definitely well worthy of being on this list. So my first player who hasn't played an NBA minute yet is Darius Acuff, who slides in this list at 18.
Yeah, I like it. I had, for what it's worth, I had VJ's like 21 or 22 on this list, like right on the threshold of the top 20. But I like what you said about his opportunity, at least this next year and probably the next 2 to 3 years, is just at best, he's probably going to be the number 3 option, right? At best.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't see a world where he can reach his full potential with the current roster of the Sixers. I think he's going to be an unbelievable quote unquote role player. Like, role player will not define what he is, but that's what he's doing for them the next couple years. And I think he's going to excel in that role, but I agree with you. His full potential will not be reached on Philadelphia the next handful of seasons. Acuff's interesting. You know how high I was on Acuff compared to the rest of the draft. But similar to the reason why I looked at Stephon Castle, I don't see Acuff winning many games in the next 3 seasons. And I think that will hurt kind of where people put him on their rankings come 5 years, because Sacramento is not a winning culture, not a winning city. And I think that will hurt his, I guess not legacy, but his career outlook in 5 years for me. So that's the only reason why I kept Acuff off this list. But I like it. Bottom 3 is good. Giannis, for you, by the way, he's way up on the list for me. Way higher than 20. So
wow, really?
Yeah. So
I thought it was bold putting him in my list.
No. So I'm way higher on Giannis, and I'll get to him when I get to him, obviously. But I'll pick up my list at 17. And this is an interesting one. I think this is going to be a head scratcher for you. But I've got Paolo Banchero at 17. And this was based off one reason and one reason only, is his playoff numbers. Paolo Banchero, in every important game he's ever played in for Orlando, he shows up and he shows out. I know he's inconsistent in the regular season. I know he can't really shoot the 3 ball well. I know he settles for jump shots too much. And all that is true. But the kid is only 23 years old. If this guy develops a smarter basketball IQ, right, and they put more pieces around him in Orlando, or maybe imagine Paolo Banchero as the second option on a championship team at the age of 26 in 3 years, right? Like, if he decides to leave Orlando and join, like, for example, Cade in Detroit, right? Like a Cade and Paolo duo or something, right? Anything along those lines where he joins a team with an already number 1 and he can kind of take that role of, I'm not taking as many shots, I'm dominating in my, second option role. Very similar to what we've seen from Jaylen Brown. I think he could be that mold of, like, if he had a Jason Tatum next to him, I think he would look just like Jaylen Brown, right? He's that good, 23 years old. And this was purely, like, him on this list is purely because of what I've seen him do in the playoffs, in the play-in tournament, in the in-season tournament. Like, all the important games, Paolo Banchero shows up and shows out. In Game 7 against Detroit this year, you could argue he was the best player on the court, even though they lost, because I'm pretty sure he dropped about 40 on Detroit, who was looked at as the number 1 defense or a top 3 defense in the league. So Paolo, for me, at 17, again, he's only 23. We like to, shit on him, but in 5 years, he's going to be 28. Jalen Brunson just won a championship, and he's 29. So let's just put that in perspective of how young Paolo is, and I think he is physically, he's one of the more, like, top to bottom. If I could build an NBA player, it would have the build of Paolo, LeBron, Giannis. Like, all those guys are so skilled, strong, and just athletic that I think he has the body type to succeed in the NBA, and I think we've seen him perform in the playoffs. So Paolo, for me, at 17, is really good. And then 16, followed up with another head scratcher, Chet Holmgren at 16. I know, but again, the kid is already the second best defensive player in the league already, and I still think what we saw in college from an offensive standpoint can be harnessed into a little more in the next 5 years. So, predicting 5 years from now, if Chet Holmgren has 5 full years of offensive development with his defensive capabilities and his youthful age, I do believe he will still be a top 20 player in the league. He just made All-NBA, which in theory would make him a top 15 player, which I know you and I disagree with. He is not a top 15 player in the league right now. But in 5 years, I do think with all that development, all that experience, all that talent, with a winning organization in Oklahoma City. I think Chet in 5 years is going to be better than what he is now, which is why I have him on this list at 16. And then 15, I'm going with his Thunder teammate, Jalen Williams. The only problem I have with him on this list is his injury history. And I do think that especially the hamstring is something that could come back at any moment. So that does scare me. But this is a guy that scored 40 points in an NBA Finals game. And I'm getting 5 more years of development of that. I truly believe he is a top 15 player in the league in 5 years. So that is my 17 through 15, Paolo, Chet, J-Dub.
Okay, Paolo and J-Dub, I hear you out on both of those. Both of them were in my honorable mentions. Paolo especially because he silenced a lot of my doubts in his playoff run, even though Orlando lost in the first round. He is primarily the reason they were competitive in it in the first place before they choked a 3-1 lead. Besides the point, Chet Holmgren?
Yeah.
I don't even think he was on my honorable mentions. I mean, with Shea, I mean, it's a very similar argument that I used for VJ Edgecombe, and that Chet Holmgren is going to be the third option at best. And that's assuming they don't get a random guard that turns into that they can develop into an all-star and trade away for 2 first-round picks like Jared McCain this year, right? The Thunder are so good at development that at this point, if Chet hasn't developed his offensive game and you're putting up 4 points in a game 7, yeah, I've lost belief in your offensive abilities. Yes, he's still going to be an incredible defensive player. He will still be likely a top 3 defensive player in the league. I personally have him at 3rd in my rankings. Second isn't that far off. So he will still be an impactful borderline all-star because of his defensive impact. But I think Chet Holmgren is slightly better than Rudy Gobert offensively. Slightly better. I think there's levels between him and a lot of the other offensively gifted centers in the league. I am not a believer in Holmgren in the slight, at least on the Thunder.
That's crazy disrespect.
If he changes teams and if he is like on a tanking team, okay, if he's on a tanking team that has no pressure to win and he has time to develop his offensive game, yes, maybe I could see something there. While he's on the Oklahoma City Thunder with Shea, with J-Dub, with whatever other guards and forwards they manage to develop in the next 5 years, yeah, Chet is simply only a defensive anchor.
My only counter argument is the Rudy Gobert point. Like, Rudy Gobert couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat from 3-point range. Okay, like, that dude couldn't shoot a basketball. He can't even make free throws. Like, okay, so Chet offensively, just as a shooter, is levels beyond Rudy Gobert. I understand what you're saying, and the Game 7 recency bias is real. Like, that was the worst game of his life. Forget his career. That was the worst game of his life. And it was against what you would call the greatest defender of all time. So I want to cut back some slack because when Chet Holmgren is averaging like a 20-point double-double every other night when he plays against the Kings, for example, right? Like, no one talks about that. But then he goes and plays the Spurs and Wemby in Game 7 and has a dud. So, again, 5 years of development for Chet Holmgren. I'm predicting he'll be better than he is today. And today he's already looked at as a top 20 player just because of his defensive capabilities. So that's just my opinion on him. I understand where your hesitancy comes from. I totally understand that. But he's not a Rudy Gobert type of player. And that I don't think that's where his career is heading to. And I don't think that's where his career is headed. That's all. That would be my counter argument.
Okay, it may have been wrong to call a Rudy Gobert-esque player, but I think if that he's on the Thunder, that is going to be his role on the team for the next half decade. And I don't think his offense is good enough to. I don't know. He's got to do more than just be a defensive anchor to make an all-star game, to be a top 20 player.
I agree.
And yeah, if he can be more than a defensive anchor, you are absolutely right on this. But I do not believe Chet Holmgren can.
Here's what I would do.
That was Ben Simmons-esque in terms of what it'll do.
Here's what I want you to do. Before our next episode, just look up Chet Holmgren Gonzaga highlights and then tell me Rudy Gobert was moving like that in college. Okay, just want you to do that.
Rudy Gobert played in France, but yeah.
You understand my point, right? Like,
yeah.
So, all right, go ahead.
Like, Yeah, it's different, but Ben Simmons at a point was moving like that too, and then he had that
Hmm.
one play against the Hawks, and then his confidence was just demoralized.
I know.
I think that like it kind of be a douchebag move of me to predict that, but I could very well see something in the likes of that for Chet Holmgren. But before we get caught up on that too long, let's move on to my 17 through 15. 17, this is a name that might surprise you. I have Devin Booker. Devin Booker at 17. And spoiler alert, I don't have Donovan Mitchell or Jalen Brunson on this list. So the reason I have Devin Booker instead of those two is because Donovan Mitchell is an athletic player, right? He's somebody that wants to blow by you and dunk on you in the paint. Jalen Brunson is a quick player. He wants to blow by you and use 10 different pivots to hit some kind of incredible bank shot layup over you. Both of those players are definitely more reliant on their athleticism than someone like Devin Booker is, whose specialty is elbow jumpers, baseline jumpers, rise up and knock it down over you. I mean, Devin Booker on the Suns was getting compared to Kobe just because of his play style and how he preferred to shoot mid ranges, then take it to the rim and dunk on you, which or make a and one layup, which is more Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson's play style. Those are play styles that historically do not age well. In fact, the game of smaller guards as a whole does not age well. Steph Curry is the only anomaly. You can't name another small guard in the NBA that has had an extended prime like Steph Curry. He is truly one of a kind, but I also think Steph has kind of changed our expectations on how guards should age. And the reality is that if you're 6'3" and under, it's hard for you to still maintain your high level of play when your athleticism is not what it was and you're 28, 29 years old. That's just reality. So I think that is something that's going to affect guys like Mitchell and Brunson more so than Devin Booker. Devin Booker, I feel like he's going to be 34 and still averaging 25 a game. I don't think that's going to change. Devin Booker, by the way, he's never been an elite shooter. Devin Booker averages 35% from three throughout his career, and he has never shot over 40% from 3-point range. Kind of insane for me to learn about while I was researching this video. His career average is what VJ Edgecombe shot this year. So he's never been a particularly elite shooter. He just has volume. And he'll continue to have volume because he's the face of the Phoenix Suns, and he'll be the face of the Phoenix Suns because he keeps re-signing rich contract with them. It doesn't seem like he's going to leave Phoenix ever, even no matter how bad they get. So he's going to continue to be on this shitty team where he can put up empty stat numbers and get all-star games on an uncompetitive team. Is that more valuable than a third or fourth option on a playoff team? I'll leave that up to debate. But I think Devin Booker is going to be able to continue putting up stats regardless of whether they're empty or not, and that's more confidence than I can have in Mitchell and Brunson at that stage in their career. So that's my argument for having Booker at 17. At 16, I have my second member of the 2026 draft class, and Caleb Wilson. Now, I am buying up all the Caleb Wilson stock I can after his summer league. He very well could be rookie of the year this year just because of the opportunities that he'll have that the top two will not on their team. I mean, Caleb Wilson blew everyone away, especially in that first game in the summer league where he had 35 points, knocked down 8 threes. Now, I will say, yes, even Zion Williamson knocked down 4 threes in his first NBA game, right? You got to see it play out a little bit more before you can call Caleb Wilson a shooter. And yes, he was awful from free throw, which, free throws are more of a testament of one's shooting ability than three-pointers are. But this is a player that is going to be an immediate two-way impact in the league, right? Defense was not a question with Caleb Wilson. We know he's going to impact the game defensively. The question was how much of an offensive impact can he make right now, and how much of an offensive impact will he be able to make in his prime? Well, he just averaged 24, 7 and 3 on 60% field goal shooting, field goal percentage in the summer league. That's pretty good offensive impact. If his prime looks anything near to that stat line, with the defense that he contributes, we might be looking back on this ranking and being like, wow, 16 was too low for Caleb Wilson. He is somebody that could easily shoot up to, I could see Caleb Wilson as a top 10 player in these rankings 5 years from now. So 16 might even be a little too conservative for his skill set. But For now, that's where he is. Caleb Wilson at 16, he could easily be higher than that. And at 15, I have Jalen Johnson. I know I have expressed concerns about Jalen Johnson this season, and those concerns are still present, right? I don't know. I don't believe in his ability to be a number one offensive option on a contender. I don't think his offensive bag and his ability to score is particularly deep enough. And right, and there's nothing wrong with that because he does everything else at such a high level, at an elite level, if you want to say. He rebounds, he playmakes, he defends, he sets screens, he rolls, he pops. I mean, everything else he does at such a high level, and it's what allows the game to be easier for the Hawks guards. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dyson Daniels, CJ McCollum, having a do-it-all, jack of all trades on the court. I mean, Jalen Johnson last year averaged 23, 10, and 8. Yeah, the scoring numbers aren't incredible, but that's a near triple-double. That's 2 assists away from a triple-double. That is really a player who can do it all on the court. And if his averages continue to stay like that, yeah, he's going to rack up the All-Star accolades in the next 5 years, and he'll probably make a couple All-NBAs if the Hawks are in playoff contention. So Jalen Johnson doesn't need to be this 25 to 27 point per game scorer to be an elite player for what the Atlanta Hawks need right now. He is doing exactly what they need. They probably still do need a number one scoring option if they want to win a championship. But the Hawks are locked and loaded into the playoffs with the core they have, and that is largely due to Jalen Johnson giving his team such a high floor. So for me, Jalen Johnson comes in at 15.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson to me was in that like Paolo, AJ Dybantsa tier for me, in that like electric wing that could make an all-star year in and year out in 5 years. So yeah, I definitely considered him as well. He was right there with like VJ and like my first or second honorable mentions. Really love the Caleb Wilson argument. Again, same thing with Acuff though. The Bulls to me are just, they're like a year away from a year away, right? Like they're still not close to competing, and I wonder how that will either hurt or help his development. Maybe they just give him the ball all the time, and he's able to learn what works and what doesn't in the NBA. I'm not sure. But Caleb Wilson did have an outstanding summer league, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And then remind me who you had at 17 again.
17 was Devin Booker.
Yes, Booker. I thought that was an interesting take on Booker because he was a guy I don't have on my top 20. Neither, and to your point, I don't have Donovan Mitchell either, but I do have Brunson. So I'm interested to see what you think of my argument for Brunson. But I think Booker to me is just a guy that is, I don't want to say one-dimensional because he's not, but in 5 years I fear that he may be one-dimensional in just a pure offensive talent. He's never been a great defensive player, and I think as he gets older, his athleticism will diminish. And I think that will hurt him on the defensive side of the court. Very similar to like Klay Thompson, where offensively, he can still shoot the ball. Like that's not an issue. But athletically, defensively, he's just not the same player he was when he was 28, 29 years old. And so I think Devin Booker may fall into that same category of not defensive liability, but he's not going to be looked at as the same athletic type of player that I think he will be 5 years from now. But I like those three. I think those are good names to add. All right, so moving on to my list, I'm going to wrap up the next three in my All-Star, All-NBA tier. 14, I have Tyrese Halliburton. I think Hallie is a guy that could be higher on this list in 5 years. And I think if he didn't just tear his Achilles, I think he would be higher on this list. This is a guy that, very similar to Jalen Johnson, can do everything on the basketball court. I do think defense needs to be an area of improvement for him, but he is a great team player. He does whatever the team needs in that given game. He's very smart, has a very high IQ. Obviously, he was on Team USA for the gold medal Olympic team for a reason. Like the other guys, the legends of the game, trusted him to be on that roster, right? I'm sure he learned a lot from them, and that was right before his NBA Finals run in 2025. So we already saw what he can do with a full roster as, in my opinion, the number one option. He might not be the number one scorer, but he is the number one option, the guy that they run their offense through. And I think in 5 years, if Tyrese Halliburton maybe puts a little muscle on, improves his defense, this is a guy that's an all-star year in and year out. So that's my argument for Tyrese. I really like what I've seen from him, and not to mention he is one of the clutchest players in the NBA. And I do think that takes you a long way into winning games and to winning, debates against other players. Is when the game is on the line and you have the ball in your hands, there's only a handful of guys I would take over Tyrese Halliburton, I think. So I have him at 14. 13. This is another guy that's, again, this guy is why I don't have Darren Peterson on the list, and it's Dylan Harper. Okay, Dylan Harper in 5 years is going to be an all-star caliber guard, if not higher. I think the only reason I capped him at all-star is because he already plays with an MVP candidate on his team. So I think that's why I kind of capped him at that all-star level. But I have Harper at 13. What I saw this year, you can tell he's the most talented guard they have on their roster. More than Fox, more than Castle. And because it was his rookie season and because they didn't trust him as much as the other two, I think he was limited in some capacity. But in 5 years, the leash is off and the dog will be loose. Okay, in 5 years. Dylan Harper is going to be the best guard on the Spurs in 5 years, which is why I have him ranked 7 spots over Stephon Castle. And I really, the most literal sense of a 1-2 punch, because Wemby wears number 1 and Harper wears number 2. It's the literally most literal definition of a 1-2 punch. I think they'll be looked at as a Jamal Murray-Jokic duo in the league in 5 years. Just whenever they're on the court together and they're running pick and roll or they are handling, off-ball screens, whatever, right? Jamal and Jokic have always been looked at from a chemistry perspective and a skill perspective as an unstoppable duo. And I do think we are heading towards Harper and Wemby entering that conversation in 2 to 3 years. But give me 5 years of Dylan Harper. Yeah, he's going to be a top 13 player. So that's where I have him. And then at number 12, this is a tough one for me. I've been back and forth on 2 names just based on tiers, who I want to put in the MVP tier and who I want to put here. But I'll go 12 is Brunson. And I almost put Harper over Brunson. The only reason I have Brunson over Harper is I kind of disagree with your take on he relies on athleticism. Jalen Brunson is very fundamental in his bag. A lot of the moves that he does closer to the basket are based on fundamentals. And when I watch Jalen Brunson play, the more I thought about it this offseason, he reminds me of Tim Duncan, but as a guard. And Tim Duncan's game aged quite well for, a player that wasn't that athletic, was never the guy that could jump the highest, right? But Tim Duncan in his later years was still, I would argue, a top 12, top 15 player in the league. So for me, Brunson is in that tier. I think I would put Harper over Brunson personally, just based on ceiling. But I think Brunson offensively is going to be serviceable, similar to your argument for Booker. And then you tack on the winning aspect. I think in 5 years, Jalen Brunson could still be the second option on a championship team, very similar to what we saw with Kyrie in Dallas. I know we've had that discussion recently. I think Brunson could average 24, 25 points per game just because of how smart he is. And yes, his quickness will take a dip, obviously. His defensive capabilities are already bad now, so they're not going to get any better in 5 years, in my opinion. But from an IQ perspective and the way he scores, he outthinks whoever's guarding him most of the times, and I don't think that is going to deteriorate with age. Very similar to what we've seen from Tim Duncan, very similar to what we've seen from LeBron, is their mind will go farther than their body when it comes to how do I score, how do I get my teammates open, and I think Brunson is in that similar mold. So that's why I have him on this list, and I have him as my final all-star / all-NBA caliber player.
Yeah, let me just say with Tyrese Halliburton, I had him as an honorable mention, but if he didn't have his Achilles tear, I think I'd have him top 10. I think he'd be a top 10 player on this list in 5 years. It's the Achilles tear and not seeing him play at all last year. That just scares me. I'm about to say a player that was hurt all of last year is still going to be top 25 years from now. I don't feel confident doing that. There's another player that tore his Achilles and played last year that I do have on this list. And that's solely because he played. That's solely because I saw him. And that's essentially the only difference between Halliburton and this other player that I'm going to get to in a little bit. So I don't hate Halliburton at all. I think he could very well, like you said, be a riser on this list. I just didn't feel confident putting him on after not seeing him play for an entire full calendar year. Um, and Brunson, I had Brunson as an honorable mention, right? So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I agree with you more than I do Chet Holmgren per se. But I just don't think there's a long track record of six flat guards being even all-star players well into their 30s. I think there's a very clear cutoff date for these 6'1", 6'2" guards where after a certain point, even if a player is more reliant on their IQ or their shooting or whatever skill set doesn't require athleticism, the amount that your body just loses when you cross that threshold is like they don't. Size is something they never had to play with, right? 35-year-olds that are 6'8" will never lose that 6'8" ability. And as unfair as it is, being tall in the NBA is an advantage, right? That makes you expected to be better at basketball. So a six flat guard who is 33 years old, who would definitely have lost a step offensively, yes, his IQ will still be there. I could still very well see him being an important role player for championship contenders in his age 33 year. But being the number one option or even the number two option, I think is just a lot to ask for a guard of his stature. That's just because Brunson got a late start, right? He played 4 years of university ball. It's not exactly entirely his fault. He got a late start to the NBA, but that's just how the game has worked. He could prove me wrong, right? He could be an exception to the rule, like Curry. But yeah, I just don't. I can't predict that. That would be an anomaly to say the least if Brunson was still contributing that high in 5 years.
Yeah, I hear you there. He was probably, I think I have him too high on my list looking back on it now. But I still needed to include him because I think when you talk about the small guards as number one options, he's one of three to win an NBA championship. The other two being Steph and Isaiah Thomas. So, I mean, he's in pretty rarefied air already, and he's already defied the odds for a guy of his stature. So I don't, I think when you say he is an anomaly, or it would be an anomaly, he's already done a lot of things that I think would consider him an anomaly, and I have no problem including him on this list, but I definitely could hear you out on lowering him. Probably below Harper, Halliburton, right around like Chet area for me, I think is probably better.
Yeah, that's fair. Having it in the top 20 is not. I don't think that's a bad take at all. I think having Chet Holmgren is very questionable. Brunson is very fair. Let's get on to my 14 through 12, and for my 14 and my 13. All right, I kind of cheated for this one. I put Castle and Harper right by each other. I put Castle at 14, Harper at 13 specifically. And the reason I did this is because neither of them will hit their full potential if they are still playing together. I really could not honestly tell you which of these two already star guards will be the lead guard on the Spurs 5 years from now, because they both have pros to their game. I mean, Stephon Castle, yes, I do think Dylan Harper is a better guard, right, if we want to label these guys. But I also think Castle is a lot more versatile, especially defensively. I mean, Castle can guard 1 through 4 at a very high level. And come playoff basketball specifically, that switchability is incredibly useful. It is so helpful for the Spurs. It allows them to hide bad defenders on weaker offensive players because you can put Castle on taller, stronger forwards and he can hold his own. That is so incredibly useful. Such an underrated skill. I mean, the only criticism you can make of Castle at this point in his career is his turnovers. If he cuts back on his turnovers, Castle is an all-NBA talent, right? He could do anything. And I think if he leaves the Spurs, he could easily rise into the top 10. Dylan Harper, I put higher because his potential is higher. Dylan Harper, if he leaves the Spurs, I could see him winning the MVP. I mean, this was a rookie who at times was the best offensive option for the Spurs in the NBA Finals. That is unheard of. That is Magic Johnson legendary status-esque. I mean, you could have made not a very, very strong case, but you could have made a case that Dylan Harper was Finals MVP if the Spurs were to go on to win it. I still think Wemby would have won it, and I think Wemby would have deserved to win it. But there would have been a small proportion saying Dylan Harper deserves it. And you know what? I would have at least heard them out because he was that good in the finals as a rookie. In 5 years from now, yeah, he's going to be stupid good. Like you said, the leash will be off. Dylan Harper will be unleashed on the league. I think he could very well be unleashed as soon as next year. I think Dylan Harper could be an all-star if the Spurs are willing to let him start and get the playing time he deserves, quite frankly. And again, the only reason those two are this low on this list is because neither of them are going to hit their full potential if they play together. If one or the other leaves the Spurs for whatever reason, both of them will shoot up into the top 10 of this ranking. I don't think they will in the next 5 years. That's something that'll happen down the road. But, you never know. We'll see what happens. At number 12, I have my third 2026 draft class member, Darren Peterson. And the question around Darren Peterson is not about his talent, it is about his passion. But he said all the right things in Summer League, right? He seemed like somebody that cares about the game. There's now been a given reason for the cramping issues, which is creatine usage in college, right? So it's not like it's not he didn't care for the game anymore. It's that he tried to take creatine and he didn't drink enough water, right? Shit happens. That's not something to critique a player to an extreme amount about. So I've kind of dissipated the questions from Peterson's commitment to the game and passion for basketball. He showed me in Summer League, at least, that this is something that he loves to do. He loves the ball. And the talent level, he didn't shoot efficiently in the Summer League, but that's also what you would expect from a rookie guard. You don't expect efficiency. The flashes of shot-making ability that he showed us in Summer League, the handle that he showed, cross shit on Juju Watkins, and then admittedly break a three-pointer. But that was one of the nastiest ankle breakers I have seen in a while. This is an offensive weapon, Darren Peterson is. He's I think he will come into the league as an elite 3-level scorer. I think by year 2, Darren Peterson will be an all-star. And I think his guy's ceiling offensively is limitless. I think he could be a 30-point per game scorer in the league one day. I think he is that good. The one thing that stops me is his role on the Jazz. He's going to have to prove he is better than the Jazz veterans that they already have. Keontae George, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr. He's going to have to prove that he is more reliable offensively than these guys. And truthfully, I think by the end of his rookie year, he will. I think by the end of his rookie year, Peterson will be the number one option on the Utah Jazz. And me predicting that shows that I have really high hopes for his ceiling. Putting him at 12, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I do think Peterson, from an offensive standpoint, is already polished. You could say he's going to be more polished when he gets used to NBA defenses and schemes and all that. But yeah, the sky's the limit offensively for him. 30 points per game is a lot, but Darren Peterson, again, like you said, does have the capabilities of that for sure. Yeah, I think it's hard for me to predict every player in the top 4 or 5 in this draft class to be a boom, right? Every single one of them to reach their ceiling. I think that would be, that's just unrealistic in my mind. And even though Peterson, to me, yes, he could be an all-star. Boozer, Wilson, AJ, all of them could be all-stars, but how many of them, if you had to guess of those 4, how many of them would reach their ceiling? What would you predict all 4 out of the 4 of them?
I would say AJ and Caleb are the most likely to. Those are the players I feel safe having on this list, whereas Acuff and Peterson, I feel more iffy about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so 50%. And I think that's, historically, 50% of drafts do not turn out to be all-star, all-NBA caliber talents. Now, the 2026 class is different. I understand that. But it is hard for me to predict that. But I understand, again, the points you make for Peterson is strong. Personally, I would not have him ranked over Dylan Harper. Just based on what I've seen in the NBA. Again, Peterson's an awesome scorer. He had a great summer league. But how will he perform in the playoffs? How will he perform next to guys that are better than him if not as good as him right now, like a Keontae George. Like I saw Dylan Harper take a backseat to De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle, and when he was on the court, he still balled out. That's a mentality thing. For me, when Keontae George is going for 40, what's Darren Peterson doing? Is he pouting? Is he sitting on the bench because they can't play him when Keontae George is playing well, right? What happens when Markkanen's on the verge of a triple-double one night? So to me, from a mentality standpoint, I have no questions about his passion for basketball, like you said, but how good of a teammate is he? Because at Kansas, he was not a good teammate. Whether it was cramps, whether it was personal issues, whether it was I'm ready to get to the NBA, I don't care about Kansas, I think you could all lump that into a category of a quote-unquote bad teammate. So for me, that would be my only harp on Peterson right now because, like you said, the talent is undeniable. Moving up to my second.
That's a good point, though. I think if I were to flip it, or I think if I were reading my list, I would put Harper in front. That's a really good point. But yeah, I mean, Peterson's an incredibly talented player. It's just the question of mentality, and I probably should have considered that a bit more. But yeah, let's hear you're now 11 and 10, moving into our top 10 of the rankings.
Yeah, so we've now moved past the all-star caliber players, and these are players that I think could win the league MVP in 5 years. So these are guys that I think are like no-brainer all-stars and could definitely still or win their first MVP in 2031. So at number 11, I have Jaylen Brown. And this is a guy that he's finally getting an opportunity to be the number one. And I think there are question marks about Embiid and Maxey being the number one, but I don't think you make a trade like that for a guy like Brown and then tell him to be the second option. I do think, especially when Embiid is gone from Philly, Brown will step into the number one role because I think Maxey is the perfect Robin to Jaylen Brown's Batman. And we saw Jaylen Brown take the Celtics to the number 2 seed without Jason Tatum this year when he was in MVP conversations already. So now Brown is going to get 5 years for these rankings, 5 years to really hone in his skills as a number one and learn what it takes in the playoffs, in the regular season, year in and year out to be the number one guy for an organization. And I also think something that not a lot of these other players have on this list is a chip on their shoulder. Jaylen Brown has always been told his entire career that you are not as good as Jason Tatum. Well, now, last year was kind of his chance to prove it, but everyone knew Tatum was coming back. Now that he's no longer on the Celtics and he plays for one of their biggest rivals, he has a chance to prove all along what he already believes in his head, and that he's better than Jason Tatum. Whether I believe that or not doesn't matter. Jaylen Brown believes he's better than Jason Tatum, and I think that will benefit him because of he has a little bit of an ego, and I think the best players in the league need that to succeed at the highest level. So I have Jaylen Brown at 11. I do think 34 is kind of pushing it for a league MVP. I do think that. However, if Brown won the league MVP in 2031, I think both of us would not be surprised based on where he is currently positioned with Philly. At number 10, I know you're going to love this pick, Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes, to me,
I do love that pick,
is a league MVP in the making. This guy is a Giannis Kawhi build of a two-way dominant force, okay? And similar to Paolo, Scottie Barnes' playoff performance really got him higher on this list for me than I think he should have been. Because in the regular season, Scottie Barnes was your typical, borderline all-star player on both ends of the court. Defensively, obviously, is his strong suit, but offensively, he was nothing special. In the playoffs, very similar to Paolo, you could argue Scottie Barnes was the best player in that series with Cleveland, even though they ended up losing. And to me, I think Scottie is a little more just polished as a player than a Paolo Banchero. And I think he's going to get more opportunities to be the number one because we just haven't seen him as the number one guy yet, right? They've had Brandon Ingram. They've had RJ Barrett, right? And all these guys, they had Emmanuel Quickley this year, right? All these guys, other than Ingram, are young and they're developing together, and you didn't really know who was going to be the alpha because they were all coming up together. But I think Scotty Barnes in the playoff run established himself as the alpha of the Toronto Raptors. You bring in Kawhi this year, hopefully, if the trade goes through. I think the next 2 to 3 years, Kawhi is going to teach Scotty Barnes everything he knows and more. And in 5 years' time, we're looking at a league MVP candidate in Scotty Barnes. So he's number 10 on this list. And then I will go number 9 here. This is the guy that I was flip-flopping between Brunson and this guy, if I wanted Brunson in the MVP tier or in the All-Star tier, but I ended up switching it for age. I have Tyrese Maxey here at 9. And you might be saying to yourself, why is Maxey over Brown? Well, that's completely an age thing. I think in 5 years' time, Tyrese Maxey will only be 29 years old, which is the same age as Jalen Brunson is today, right now. And Tyrese Maxey, to me, is what I think everyone thinks Darren Peterson will be. Like, Maxey is already what Darren Peterson can be. An elite 3-level scorer who's quick as hell, who can do everything on the basketball court except play defense. That, to me, is like, if you were to tell me what the mold for Darren Peterson is, it's like Tyrese Maxey. It's obviously going to look different. But Maxey, to me, we've seen him be a number 1, and he's kept Philly in the mix in the Eastern Conference as the number 1. I think bringing in Brown's going to help. And I don't know if he can be a number 1, but I do think he's good enough to win a league MVP. And in 5 years' time, him being 29 years old, that's, Shea age, Brunson age. Luka is already 27, I'm pretty sure. So these guys are going to be the guards right now are going to be, on their way out at the end of time, and I think Maxey is good enough to slide right in there. So I have him at number 9.
First of all, round of applause to you for the Scotty Barnes pick. I love that pick. That has been my favorite pick of yours so far on your list, and I think you're going to see why when I get to him on my list. Jaylen Brown, he made my honorable mentions, but, the age is scary. Right now, he is 29 years old. In 5 years, he will be 34. Jaylen Brown is the best he's ever going to be right now. I agree with you at the chip and the winning and the value he adds as a winner in the NBA, but I don't think 34-year-old Jaylen Brown, who still will not have a left hand, will be an all-star level player in the 30. He was honestly one of my easier players to cut from my honorable mentions. If he develops a left hand, everything could change. But, age 29, Jaylen Brown hasn't yet, so why would I expect him to in the next 5 years? I can't. But yeah, I love the Scotty pick a lot. I'm going to rattle off my 11 through 8 because I feel like my top 7 there's a very clear hierarchy, and you haven't listed any players from my top 7 yet. So I think our top 7 will be pretty much the same 7 players. So I'm going to go ahead and rattle off my 11 through 8. Starting with 11, I also have Tyrese Maxey. I do think Tyrese Maxey and Acuff are more comparable than Tyrese Maxey and Peterson. Due to Peterson's height, he's able to play the 2 at a lot higher of a level than I believe Maxey or Acuff will be able to in their careers. Not really a knock on him, just Peterson offers more versatility because of his height. But like you said, Tyrese Maxey is already an elite offensive weapon. In his age 25 year, he averaged 28, 4, and 7. 28 points per game is an elite number. And then I think his playmaking, I think we've underrated that. 7 assists a game is that's definitely noteworthy. I'm not an elite level playmaker, but definitely a great playmaker. Maxey is rising to the level of, and he's only 25, right? He's going to continue improving in the next 3 years. Tyrese Maxey has made an individual leap in his game every year the last 2 years, or if you want to say the last 3 years, I would hear you out there too. This is a guy that could keep improving. What's stopping him? Calipari guards tend to do very, very well in the NBA. That's again a reason why I had Acuff on this list. Maxey is a Calipari protege. He was coached by the great Calipari in college. His game has translated to the NBA, and I think he has another leap to take. I think Tyrese Maxey could get even better. Maybe not statistical, maybe not in terms of statistics, but in terms of his ability to win in the NBA. Now that the Sixers have acquired Jaylen Brown and will likely be contenders in the East for the next 2 years at least, if not the next 5 years, I think deep playoff runs will help Maxey on this list more so than, statistical improvements could do. And I think the Sixers are very likely, or it's very possible for them to break through and make an Eastern Conference final or even an NBA Finals appearance. And if that's the case, Maxey will be a top 10 player on this list if we were to redo it. Number 10, I have Jason Tatum. And it was scary for me to bet on Tatum this high coming off his Achilles, right? But the fact that I was able to see him play this year gives me a lot more faith in him than Tyrese Halliburton. And admittedly, Tatum did look like he lost a step, right? He didn't look as quick as he did pre-Achilles tear. He didn't look like he could nearly jump as high. But Jason Tatum will still remain an elite shot maker, a 6'10 elite shot maker throughout his prime. That's something that'll never be lost. And more so, the Boston Celtics are now, unquestionably, without a doubt, Jason Tatum's team. It was 1A, 1B with him and Jaylen Brown for a while. You didn't know who was going to go off on any given night. But now, the Boston Celtics will win or lose. Those seasons will be defined by how good Jason Tatum plays. That's a lot of pressure. That could be for better or for worse. But I do think he has the potential to be a top 10 player on this list 5 years from now because the Boston Celtics will win or lose because of him. He'll be 33. He'll also be on the older side of players that I've had listed on this list. But wings tend to age better than guards and centers just because of their height and their skill set. As Tatum is not going to be shorter than 6'10 anytime soon. He is not going to lose his jump shot ability anytime soon. That is still a very potent build that has served guys like Kevin Durant late into their 30s, right? I'm not saying Tatum's going to be Kevin Durant, but I'm saying his skill set should be able to translate later in his career, much like KD's. And KD, for one, is also a guy who came off an Achilles tear and is still playing at an elite level. So there's precedent there for there's precedent there for forwards, unlike guards. And that's why I feel more confident in Tatum than a guy like Halliburton. 10 might be a bit high. I think I would rather have put Tatum lower now that I'm reading off the list. But yeah, that's where I have him at 10. Number 9, the last player of the 2026 class, AJ Dybantsa. Now, this could be my boldest one. I am sitting here telling you I think a player who hasn't played a single NBA minute is going to be a top 10 player in the NBA. That is a bold take. That is something that could easily blow up in my face. But I'm that high on AJ Dybantsa and his potential. And I think much like Caleb Wilson, we could be looking at this 5 years from now and being like, wow, I cannot believe I only had AJ Dybantsa at 9. I think this guy is a truly generational talent. And watching him in the Summer League, he only played 2 games, but he averaged 25 points. He was the best player on the court, bar none, obviously, on a court that he shared with Darren Peterson in the 2 Summer League matchup. And I think this guy is going to join an immediate playoff contender in the Wizards with the roster and core that they develop with Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, Bilal Coulibaly. I think there's a lot of pieces on that Wizards team that they can make an intriguing run. Not a run, but at least a leap into the Eastern Conference's top 6. I could foresee that. And a lot of that credit will be put on Dybantsa as the number 1 overall pick. And a lot of the pressure, therefore, will be as well. If this Wizards team wants to become championship contenders, it's not going to be because of Trae Young or AD. It's going to be because of AJ Dybantsa. And I think he is truly good enough to get them there very quickly. Anthony Davis led his team to a Western Conference at 22. Wemby just led the Spurs to a finals run at 22. We've seen precedent from young players having early playoff success. I think Dybantsa is the most likely out of this group of players to experience that same success early in his career. So that's my reasoning for having Dybantsa at number 9. He will only be 24 5 years from now as well. So I'm going to go ahead and list off my number 8 just because our top 7 is kind of its own tier on my end. And that's where I have Scottie Barnes at number 8. And for a lot of the same reasons, I think you summed it up perfectly. This is an elite 2-way talent. A lot of the players that we listed are elite offensively, but we project will take a step back or 2 defensively. Let me just say, if Wembanyama loses a depoy in the next 5 years, I think it will be to Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes, in my opinion, is the second best defender in the NBA. I would put him over Chet in my personal rankings. And I think his offense is coming into form, especially like you said in the playoff run. I think he was the best player on the court on both sides of the ball. I think Barnes, I think Kawhi Leonard is a perfect comparison for him, a player that was strong defensively, but his offensive game maybe took a few extra years to develop. But when it did develop, wow, that's a player you did not want to go against. Barnes, he is right on the cusp of being an MVP level talent for me because of what he can do on both sides of the ball, like Kawhi Leonard, like Giannis. I think the moon is the absolute ceiling for this guy. He can be as good as he wants to be. And I'm really excited to see what Scottie Barnes will be 5 years from now when he's only 29 years old. That is his athletic prime. Do you think he's a good defender now? How good will he be in his athletic prime? How good will his offense have rounded out? Very, very interesting player to look at and how good he could be 5 years from now. But I think top 10 and specifically 8 is a very good place to put Scottie.
Yeah. It feels good that we agree on something for once because you and I both are high on Scottie Barnes. AJ Debonta, a little high for me. Like I said, I have him at 18. You have him at 9. So, 9 spots difference there. Again, for me, I just think it's the winning culture in Washington is not great, and he's an unproven talent for me. He reminds me very much of like a better version of Mikal Bridges. That's like the lengthy wing that's can do it on both ends. I do think AJ is just a better scorer than Mikal Bridges, but that's kind of the mold I see him as from a body type perspective. And yeah, I think your list is good. Tatum, I'll get to him in a minute. He's a couple picks away for me. So yeah, I really like your list. I think it's good so far, and I'm excited to get to the top 4 for me. So I'm gonna rattle off 8 through 5 because for me I have a top 4 tier. So at number 8, I have Giannis. Now here's my argument for Giannis. At the age of 36, did you view LeBron as a top 10 player in the league?
Yes.
Okay, I did too. Personally, I still thought in the year 2021, 5 years ago, when LeBron was 36, I still viewed him as a top 10 player. He was not the best player in the league. He was not going to win, every championship because he was unguardable, right? I don't think Giannis is going to transcend that level of longevity. But when you look at body types, Giannis is built to last against Father Time. He is built to dominate whoever is in front of him, just from a body type perspective. And I do think, very similar to my Jaylen Brown argument, this trade away from Milwaukee, I think, gave him a breath of fresh air that is going to rejuvenize the end of his career. I do think Giannis is going to have a lengthy 5 to 6, maybe even 7-year run with the Heat. And I think all 7 of those years, you will look at Giannis and say he's still a top 10 player in the league. So to me, that is why I have him this high, because of what I've seen him do before on both ends of the court. His athleticism, I think, might take a dip. But again, like you said, he's not getting any shorter for Tatum. That was your argument for Tatum. Giannis ain't getting any shorter, and the rim ain't getting any taller. All right, it's still going to be 10 feet, which means he's still going to be able to dunk it on people whenever he wants. Full speed downhill. He really improved his mid-range shooting in the last 2 years, I would say, to add that to his bag. Free throws are a problem, but when you're averaging 30 and you can't shoot a free throw, I'm not really concerned about your free throws, to be fair. So for me, I think Giannis is still going to be a top 10 player in 5 years, and honestly, he could be higher on this list, but the reason he's not is just because he's the oldest player remaining on this list for me. Number 7, I have Jason Tatum. And I think him and Giannis are kind of identical here in that 7-8 range. I do think Jason Tatum is better than Jaylen Brown, and he's also a year younger. And I think in 5 years, we'll still be looking at Jason Tatum as any given year, he could win the MVP, right? If Boston leaps to the 1 seed and Tatum is able to average 28 or 26, 6 and 6, and they're the 1 seed, I think Tatum will definitely be in the MVP conversation. And so I have him at 7. Number 6, I have Luka Doncic. And this is kind of crazy that I think Luka's going to be in the same tier in 5 years that he is right now. But I kind of view Tatum as the fifth or Luka, excuse me, as the fifth or sixth, maybe even the seventh best player in the league right now. And I don't think he's going to get any better than that in 5 years, just based on the talent in the league and where I think his overall game is transcending. I think Luka is in his prime right now. Athletically, he is not as gifted as a Tatum or a Giannis, and I think his offensive skill will take him a little bit farther than those guys in 5 years. But defensively, Luka is still not the level of some of the guys above him on this list, and so that's why I have him at 6. And then rounding out my MVP caliber players, I have SGA. I still think in 5 years, SGA is going to be averaging 27, 28 points per game, and unless J-Dub takes a significant leap or the Thunder make a blockbuster trade, I still see Shea being the best player on their team in 5 years. And that, to me, carries a little bit of weight. So I have Shea at 5 to round out my MVP caliber list.
I don't have Tatum in my top 7. So I'm trying to figure out what player you completely left off the list that I have in my top 7, because I cannot.
There's Alex. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you right now. 7, it might be this guy actually. Okay, I did this list 3 times and I forgot my first list. I forgot about Tyrese Maxey. My second list, I forgot about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And then my third list, I had to leave guys off. So there's a very good chance that I just forgot somebody on this list the third time around, because I did it on the first 2 lists. And I am looking at my notes, and there's one name that I think potentially you could have had in your top 7, but I don't think either one of us are that high on this guy. So I'm actually really interested to see who it is.
I thought it was a clear top 7, so I'm surprised that when I heard Tatum's name at 7, I was like, "Wow, you completely left one of my top 7 off the list." So maybe you forgot him, but maybe we just have an incredibly differing opinion on this guy. I'm interested to find out. Giannis, huge fan that you have Giannis that high. Still a top 10 player 5 years from now. But as somebody who's a huge fan of Giannis, I see his athleticism more like Shaquille O'Neal than like LeBron James. I mean, LeBron, his entire career, he's a better playmaker than Giannis, and he's a better shooter than Giannis. Those are 2 things that translate better into a player's late stage of their career a lot better than what Giannis has to offer. Yes, Giannis has improved his mid-range dramatically, but his free throws still suck. So how reliable is that shot really? We're just going to be a guy making 40 to 45% of his mid-ranges. That's not going to win championships or get you accolades. LeBron, for what it's worth, 3 years ago, he made his career high 41% of his threes. At his age 39 year, he made over 40% of his threes for the first time. That is a player that is still improving and growing as he continues to age. And I just don't know if Giannis is that type of player. I mean, that's not a critique of Giannis. I mean, very few players can. LeBron might be the one and only player who can point to that and say, "Yeah, I did that." But in that his style of bully ball and paint dominance is not something that typically ages well. If Giannis can improve, Giannis is an incredibly underrated playmaker, but he's no LeBron James. His mid-range shooting has improved, but he's no DeMar DeRozan, right? These aren't elite parts of his game. So it's hard for me to say those are parts that are going to continue to improve and age well. I don't know. And again, this is my favorite player of all time. This is just a player who I think is more dominant because of his athleticism than his skill set. And his skill set is good enough to make him an all-star level player, but it's the athleticism that separates him and makes him Giannis. And that's something that's not going to have when he's 36 years old. Yeah, but I'm very curious to see who you have missing.
I am ready to get onto this. I'm excited. I don't know who I missed.
Yeah, let me get my 7 through 5 right now, so we're both in our top 4. My 7 is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And out of this top 7, it was hard. I mean, I didn't want to put him someone had to be at the bottom, essentially, and that's really the only argument I have for Shai being 7. But these top 7 for me are the MVP candidates, the guys that could be the best player in the league 5 years from now. So Shea will still be an MVP candidate 5 years from now. Don't get me wrong, but he'll be 32 years old. And like I said, I'm more hesitant about guards than I am about forwards in terms of how they age. I think Kyrie Irving is a huge tell on how Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's game will age. Kyrie Irving this year, coming off an ACL injury. He's a quick, shifty player that relies on a handle and incredible angles and finishes at the rim as his primary skill set. Kyrie can shoot the rock, yes, but he's more known as a finisher at the rim. And I think that's applicable to Shea, who I don't think, his handle is not like Kyrie. He's not as clean, but it's very unorthodox, and that is very hard to guard and stay in front of. And in terms of finishing at the rim, I think Shea is probably the best guard in terms of finishing at the rim right now in today's game. So I think he has a skill set. I don't want to say he is Kyrie, but I think he has a similar skill set to Kyrie, and that Kyrie will be a tell on how Shea's game will age. If Kyrie is still an all-star coming off an ACL tear in his age 35 year, I think having Shea at 7 might still be a bit too low. So something to keep an eye on there is how Kyrie ages. I don't really have an argument for putting Shea at 7, other than I believe these 6 guys above him more. That's really all I got. But Shea will still be an MVP candidate. The Thunder will still be contenders. He will still be a dog in 5 years. I just had to put him at the bottom of this core. At number 6, I have Cooper Flagg. Coming off one of the greatest rookie seasons ever, averaging 21, 7, and 5, including becoming the first teenager to score 50 points in an NBA game. You could make a case that Cooper Flagg right now, as a 19-year-old, is a top 25 player in the league, which is incredible. He is going to get so much better 5 years from now as he gets more acclimated to the speed of the NBA game, as his body matures. I mean, it is 6. Cooper Flagg's another guy that 6 could be too low for him. This could be a guy that's an obvious top 3 5 years from now. The only reason I'm putting him at 6 is honestly just because I have the same reason as Shea. I have more faith in the other 5 guys. I have seen the other 5 guys be absolute superstars, and there's no reason to think that they should get any worse. So it's hard for me to say that Cooper, I don't know, he could very easily be top 3. This top 7 is all fairly interchangeable, but it did not feel great putting Cooper Flagg above some of these other guys above him. I feel good putting him over Shea, especially because of his two-way force, right? Cooper Flagg is going to be an elite defender throughout his career as well. And whatever he includes on offense is a cherry on top. But if Flagg is averaging 27, 28 points from now, 5 years from now, as well as what he averages defensively, this is a guy that's going to be in MVP conversations. I'm excited. Cooper Flagg is tantalizing. I'm excited to see what he will become in 5 years when he will only be 24 years old. Number 5, I have Nikola Jokic. And Jokic will be 35 years old, right? He's also on the older side of players that on this list. But Jokic is different in that he has no athleticism in his game in the slightest. I mean, this is a dude that has about a 6-inch vertical, give or take maybe a few inches. I mean, there is not a hint of athleticism in Jokic's game at all. So to me, it's like, what exactly is going to regress? Yeah, he's going to get worse defensively, but he gets his point with he scores with his incredible touch in the paint, outside the paint. He's a great rebounder because he has an incredibly high ball IQ. He knows where misses are going to go. And playmaking, like we've said this entire list, playmaking is typically not something you lose as your career goes down. It's the greatest big man playmaker that the NBA has ever seen. Jokic, 5 years from now, could still be averaging triple doubles, and that wouldn't surprise me. That's very well possible. And if he is averaging triple doubles, he will be in MVP talks. He will be probably first or second team All NBA. I just think Jokic has a game that's likely to age well, if not continue to improve. I mean, Jokic right now in his age 30 year just had his best statistical season, leading the league in rebounds and assists. Right, he is the first player ever to lead the league rebounds and assists and did that in age 30. I think you're muted, by the way. I can't hear you if you're trying to say something.
I'm not saying anything.
But Jokic, oh my bad. I think Jokic has the game that is going to age incredibly well. And I think he could be 38, 39 years old, still competing for MVPs. The question is if Jokic wants to play when he's 38, 39 years old, and I don't know. Unlikely, but yeah, I have Jokic at 5, and that rounds out the front list of my MVP candidates 5 years down the road.
I'm gonna keep it 100 with the viewers. Jokic was the guy left off my list. All right, so we can get that off here now. But I did not forget about Jokic. I actually did not forget about him. I am making the prediction that in 5 years he's no longer in the NBA. I think we are looking at a guy that's going to retire in 3 to 4 years, and I have a couple reasons for this. One, we've seen this in sports before. The most recent example in my head is Calvin Johnson retired in the middle of his peak because he just didn't appreciate the game anymore, right? Like that was his main reasoning for it, I'm pretty sure. And he might have had a couple injuries, which Jokic really has not had an injury history. But when I sit back and ask myself, what more is there for Nikola Jokic to accomplish in the NBA? What hasn't he done already? Now, again, you can make that argument for Giannis. You can make that for LeBron, Steph, but those guys all still love basketball. And I'm not going to put words in Jokic's mouth. He's never once said, I hate basketball. I don't want to play anymore. He's never said that. But he has alluded to the fact that this is not his favorite thing in the world to do. He does not eat, sleep, and breathe basketball like LeBron James, like Steph Curry, like Giannis, right? That is not Jokic's life. And when you combine that mentality with a resume literally 100% completed, there is nothing Nikola Jokic can do to improve his legacy other than maybe win another championship, but I don't know how much farther that pushes him up the list anyway. There is nothing this man has to do to change our opinion of him as a basketball player. And I think when you combine that with his mentality on basketball as a whole, I am predicting that he will not be in the league in 5 years, and that is why I did not include him on the list. If he is playing in 2031, I would rank him inside the top 10, probably right around Jason Tatum, Giannis, Tyrese Maxey. That would probably be the tier I would have him in as yes, like you said, he could still average a triple-double and win the MVP on any given year because of who he is. But my reasoning for leaving him off the list is that I'm predicting him to no longer be in the league in 5 years.
I mean, that's not a prediction that I hate. It's just I would hate to live in a world where Jokic retires before the year 2031, because this is arguably the most defining player of the 2020s so far, just in terms of what he's accomplished. Yeah, that would suck if he wasn't in the NBA in 5 years from now. At age 35, I mean, it's Jokic. His prime doesn't end because he's not reliant on athleticism at all. I also think football's a little different because, yeah, when you talk about guys like Calvin Johnson and Andrew Luck, who retired, in the midst of their prime, football is a violent sport. Football is a sport that causes players like health issues down the road. If you're lucky. If you're unlucky, brain issues, right? So Luke Kuechly is another guy that comes to mind. Players are retiring early, not because they lost their love for the game, but because they're trying to preserve their bodies. And the NBA doesn't necessarily have that issue as much. I think if Jokic is still getting max contracts, that's 250 million reasons to incentivize him to continue playing, right? And the cap's only going to go up. It's going to be a lot more than 250 million reasons. I think Jokic is eligible for an extension. I've read that with his accomplishments, he can get up to $350 million. That is $70 million a year. And that's something I don't think anybody's saying no to that. I think if he can make that kind of money in 5 years, he's going to continue to play. Basketball is not the type of sport like football that is a threat to break down your body just by playing the sport. Something would have to go freakishly wrong if that were to happen to Jokic. Obviously, hope it doesn't. But you have Jokic at number 8 or number 9. You don't think he could be a top 5 player 5 years from now?
He can, but I think his game would translate better. I also don't know Jokic from a stamina perspective. He has great endurance, but of a man of his size, how well is his body going to move up and down the court at age 35? Like that is a lot of
Fair.
that is a lot of weight running up and down the court. And for him to be in MVP conversations, I would assume he's still averaging 35 minutes a night, kind of similar to what Steph is playing now, right? Like Steph is still, if he has a great season, you would put him in MVP conversations. He's not playing 40 to 42 minutes anymore. He just can't do it. And so Jokic, who's 80 pounds heavier than Steph, at age 35, huffing and puffing up the court for 40 minutes, that to me is not realistic. So I do think his minutes would take a dip, which also would mean his stats would take a dip in theory. So yes, I do think he could be a top 5 player, absolutely, but too many dominoes would have to fall in his direction, I think, to still be a top 5 player in 5 years. And I also want to say there is a possibility, I don't know how likely this is, but Jokic to me just seems like the type of person to leave the NBA to play for his country overseas. If that was something he would be interested in, again, he'd be closer to home, he'd be closer to family, he'd be closer to his horses, he'd still be able to play basketball with Team Serbia. It wouldn't be an everyday thing for him. It would more be of a hobby than a profession, right? Like that to me is something that I also think is a possibility. Again, I don't know how likely that is, but I do think that is a possibility. You make a great point. $70 million is hard to pass up. But if there's anyone who's going to retire in his prime from this current wave of superstars, it is absolutely 100% Nikola Jokic. And that is why I left him off the list.
Agree with you there. I agree with you there. And that if there was anybody to retire early, it would be Jokic. So, I'll hear you on that argument. That's fair. But if we're operating under the assumption that Nikola Jokic will be playing 5 years from now, I think this is an undisputed top 10 player. I think he will be
absolutely. I would
top 10 5 years.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah.
We are now down to our top 4 players. Max, I'll let you decide how we do this. Do you want to rattle all 4 now, or do you want to save 1 and 2 to leave a bit of suspense?
Yeah, I'll do 3 and 4, and then we'll switch. So this tier, we are past MVP candidates, and these are my 4 faces of the league. So whether you consider these 4 players now as the faces of the league, that's up for debate. But the current NBA community, I would say, considers the faces of the league right now that are like the best players in the league: Shea, Giannis, Jokic, Luka. Like those 4 are like, even though LeBron and Steph are probably still the faces of the league, those are undoubtedly the core of the league, right? Like the faces they're trying to build around
Agreed.
On a nightly basis. So these 4 guys are who I think will replace those 4 in 5 years, if that makes sense. So at number 4, Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg, to me, if I were to redraft Cooper Flagg into this year's draft class, I still think he goes number 1, and I don't think he goes any lower than number 2. Cooper Flagg,
Agreed.
to me, I would prefer him over Debanza purely because of his defensive capabilities. I think that is something that separates him from everyone else in this draft class. Offensively, he's as good as Cam Boozer, better than Caleb Wilson as a prospect, right, offensively. But defensively, he's better than Debanza. He's better than Peterson. He's as good as Boozer defensively as a prospect. And we saw all of that translate as a rookie on a team that second best player this year was Najee Marshall. Okay? This is a guy that is going to dominate the NBA. He has the build. He has the skill set. He has the winning organization and the winning culture of Dallas behind him. They've moved off Anthony Davis, which I think was brilliant. Kyrie coming back, I think, is going to be a nice number 2 option who can run point, because I think Flagg, while he showed he can play make and can play point guard, that is not his strength. That is not his biggest strength, and I think he will reach his full potential as a forward in the NBA. So to me, Flagg is at 4 here. I still think there's 3 players that are going to be better than him in 5 years. But I think Flagg is going to be looked at as a face of the league in 5 years. Like Cooper Flag is going to be having, he's going to tie the number of primetime games that he gets in a regular season. He's going to be selling top 3 jersey sales. He's going to be on every poster. He's going to make all-star games year in and year out. He's going to be in the MVP conversation year in and year out. And I think that is where we are headed for Cooper Flag. And at number 3, I have Anthony Edwards. Very similar to Flag, where he is just an absolute superstar. In 5 years, he will be 28 or 29, I'm pretty sure. We've already seen him make 2 conference finals, which I think is a huge boost in his camp for the fact that we know he can take a team pretty far in the playoffs, and he's done something twice at age, 23, 24 that Donovan Mitchell just did for the first time ever at 29. So I'm just imagining what Anthony Edwards can do in 5 years. I think we're looking back on this video in 5 years and saying Anthony Edwards has won a championship in the last 5 years. I don't know if that's with Minnesota. I don't know if that's with a different team, but I'm just putting it out there. In 5 years, I think Anthony Edwards will have won an NBA championship, and he will undoubtedly, in my mind, be a top 3 player in the league. So that is my 3 and 4.
Ant winning the ring, I think he's more likely to win an MVP than a ring if he stays with Minnesota. If he leaves, he can go anywhere, and then that's up in the air. But I think if he stays on the Timberwolves, MVP is more likely than championship, especially after this LaMelo Ball trade. I mean, I think that moved Minnesota backwards.
Hold on, let me say one thing real quick.
I really don't know what they were hoping.
Part of my logic on him winning a championship, remember the expansion teams. Minnesota might be an Eastern Conference team in the next 2 years. So Ant getting through the gauntlet.
That's a good point.
Ant getting through the gauntlet of the West, I agree with you, is MVP is probably more likely. But if Minnesota in 2 years were to move to the East, I think they could be considered the favorites as Ant is entering his prime or in his prime. So I do want to point that out as well.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Definitely something worth considering there is either Minnesota or Memphis that would move to the Eastern Conference if Vegas and Seattle end up getting expansion teams. So, that's definitely something to keep an eye on with Ant is going to full-on shift conferences in a few years. Getting on to my 4 and 3. At 4, I have Cade Cunningham. Cade is a 6'6" guard who can do everything on the court. 6'6" or 6'8", one of those. A jumbo guard who can do everything an elite level on the court. He can score, and despite that, he's a pass-first playmaking guard. He can slash, he can defend at an elite level because of his size. This is a guy that can really do it all. I don't want to say he broke out this year because he was arguably just as good last year, but it was like he broke out this year as a winner, as a guy whose game shifts into a winning team, into a winning culture. The Pistons went from the 6th seed last year to a 60-win team this year. And they didn't make any kind of external improvements in free agency or anything. That was because of the improvement of Cade Cunningham and other various players they drafted, but mostly because of Cade Cunningham being able to get those players involved offensively. This is a guy that can really do everything on the court, that can run entire games. I think Cade Cunningham could very well win multiple MVPs in the next 5 years, just because the ball is going to be in his hands all the time. All the time. I mean, nobody else on Detroit doesn't have a number 2 right now. So they're going to win and lose because of Cade Cunningham. So if he's able to improve statistically and Detroit is able to run back their 60-win season, I think Cade Cunningham will very well be high up in MVP discussions. At number 3, I put Luka. And the only reason I put Luka above Cade Cunningham is because Luka Doncic has made a finals, whereas Cade Cunningham has never made a conference finals yet. That's really the only thing that is separating them at this point in his career. Cade is a better defender, but I do think Luka is a better offensive player. And that offensive production that Luka has translated into an NBA Finals appearance. And yes, then he got traded, and we can go on and on about that for the next hour because it was the stupidest trade in NBA history. But besides the point, reality is he got traded. Because of that, I can't put him at number 2 above this other guy because his finals kind of lacks that. The guy at number 2 made 2 Western Conference Finals with the team that he's on right now, whereas Luka Doncic has made a final with the team he's no longer on. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Lakers are able to build around him and construct a roster around him within, because the Lakers continue to be first round exits, easy playoff fodder. I think Luka is somebody that could drop down this list, right? I think 3 is about the ceiling for Luka. I don't think he has room to go to 1 and 2 unless the Lakers are able to build a championship contender around him, because the weaknesses are so prevalent. With all being said, this is a player who's averaging, 30 points a game, close to it, throughout his career. This is among the best, if not the single best, scoring talent in the NBA right now. And much like Jokic, this is also a player who doesn't rely on athleticism. This is a player who is a shot maker and who plays a game like he's operating in slow motion, right? He has no quickness to his game at all, and yet he can blow by his defender every time like it's nothing. It's truly incredible watching him play offense, because it doesn't look like he should be able to do what he does. And at age 32, those are skills that are not going to go away anytime soon. Luka Doncic will still be a 30-point per game scorer night in and night out 5 years from now. The question is, A, will the Lakers build a championship contender around him? And B, will he give a shit on defense to win in the playoffs? Those are 2 questions surrounding Luka. That's why, if either of those 2 questions are a no, he could drop down this list. But it's the Lakers, and they're known for getting stars. And I'm sure, Luka can muster an effort on defense when the games actually matter. At least I have hope that he can. So that's my argument for putting him at 3 above Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, my argument against Luka at 3, I had him at 6 on my list, would just be I don't view him as a top 3 player now, and I would consider him in his prime. Like this is like the beginning of his prime, and so 5 years is probably the end of his prime. And I don't see him being a top 3 player in 5 years if I don't see him being a top 3 player now. I think Giannis, Jokic, and Shea, you could all argue, are better than Luka heading into last season. And then I know you would argue that Wemby probably jumped Luka this past season. So to me, having Luka at 3 over a guy like Cade, I'd find that hard to do, because Cade arguably had a better season than Luka this year, and he's 3 years younger, and he hasn't even entered his prime yet. So yes, I hear your argument about him making a finals, but him making a finals with Dallas in 2023, I don't think will help his top 3 case in 5 years, I guess, if that makes sense. It helps his case now for sure, being over Cade, absolutely. But in 5 years, I think Cade's going to accomplish similar, if not more, than Luka, which is why perfect segue. I have Cade Cunningham at number 2. This top 2 for me was easy, and I honestly debated putting Cade at 1, but for sake of keeping my list intact, I'll keep it at 2 where I had it. Cade Cunningham, to me, other than Steph, is my favorite player in the league to watch. I love watching him play. I think he's the perfect definition of a guy that makes everyone around him better. Like, if you play with a guy like Cade Cunningham, you are going to be better. I think a perfect example of that is Jalen Duren or Duncan Robinson, who had arguably his best season of his career in Detroit this year. Look at Tobias Harris and what he's been doing in Detroit versus what he did in Philadelphia. I think all of that, most of it, stems from playing with a guy like Cade that gets you so many easy opportunities. It's a reason Jalen Duren is eligible for a Supermax. It's because Cade Cunningham is the starting point guard for his team, right? I think in 5 years, Cade Cunningham will be the best guard in the NBA, and that is why I have him at number 2. I think we're looking at an MVP. I think we're looking at a future champion. I think we're looking at all-star after all-star after all-star after all-star. A guy that is probably going to average 2 to 3 rebounds short of a triple-double every year for the rest of his career. Like, this guy is a walking 27, 10, and 7, right? Like, that is what I think we are looking at in Cade's prime. And like you said, he is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated defenders in the league. Nobody talks about this guy on defense because he plays with Asar Thompson and he plays with Jalen Duren, and nobody talks about Cade Cunningham's defense, but he is an unbelievable defender for a guy that has to exert that much energy on offense. He is an unbelievable defender, and he is an elite shot blocker, in my opinion. So, to me, Cade Cunningham, number 2. And then at number 1, I'm sure you agree with this, I have Wemby at number 1. While I am not as high on Wemby right now in the current rankings, I know that 5 years of development for Wemby put a few pounds on, and develop his offensive game to a point where I believe it is not yet, because I think in the finals especially, he was not very good offensively. Once he has turns to develop, playing with a guard duo of Harper and Castle, paired with his defensive capabilities, obviously, I do think Wemby in 5 years is going to be not only the best player in the league, but probably the face of the league. So that is my top 4. Wemby, Cade, Ant, Flag. And I think I love Ant to death, but I do just prefer Cade, I think, over Ant. And so that's why I think the top 2 for me were pretty easy.
Yeah, you made my transition pretty easy because my number 2 is Anthony Edwards. My 2 through 4, Ant, Luka, and Cade, those 3 were hard to rank. I think I switched the 3 of them around multiple times before I came to this ranking. And really, it just came down to playoff success and what have you accomplished in playoff basketball. Cade, he just had his first kind of good playoff run, and not including 2 years ago when he was a first-round exit in 6 games. He just had his kind of first run, was a conference semifinalist. He had a good run, but when you compare that to Luka, who has made a finals, and Ant, who has made 2 Western Conference finals, it's kind of lacking in comparison to those 2. Really allocate that. You can make an argument for any 3 of them. And Ant, in particular, I have over Luka simply because he is still on the team that he went to 2 Western Conference finals with, whereas Luka changed teams and hasn't had really any playoff success with the Lakers. Ant, at 22 and 23 years old, made the conference finals in what was undoubtedly the harder conference. He is arguably the most athletic player in the NBA right now as a 24-year-old, and that's something 5 years from now he'll be 29. That's something that will still be prominent in his game. You love Ant's mentality. You love to talk about that. That is something that, again, is going to continue to improve as he matures and gets older in the league. He will definitely be a more mature NBA player at 29 than he is right now at 24. I just think this is a player. He's more accomplished than Cade. He's younger than Luka. I feel safest putting Ant at number 2 in front of these 2 guys. Also, Ant, I think, is the best defender of those 3. Cade, like you said, underrated defender. He's a good defender. I do think Ant is a better 2-way player than Cade Cunningham. You can make a case either way. It's not something I'm really, dying on the sword by, but that was my reasons for having Ant at 2. My number 1 is Nate Ahmet, future Bucks legend. No, I'm trolling. It's Wembanyama. And there's not really much I have to say to defend it. At age 22, he just led his team to the finals. At age 22, he won the DPOY. Not just won the DPOY, won it unanimously for the first time in NBA history. I think if Wemby averaged 0 points and 0 assists, if he was a complete non-factor on offense, he would still make this list solely because of what he does on defense. I think he is that impactful on the defensive end. I've said this before on the podcast. We like to talk about Curry's gravity on offense. Wemby has anti-gravity on defense. I think just his presence impacts the game on that end of the ball so much. It makes everybody else's job on the Spurs easier. It makes everybody else's job for whatever team they're facing that much more difficult, because you can blow by your man, but you still have to finish over a 7'4" demigod just roaming around in the paint, waiting to swat the shit out of your shot. I mean, this is, I would say, the greatest defensive player, or at least the most impactful defensive player the NBA has ever seen. So when you take the most impactful player the NBA has ever seen on the defensive end and say, oh yeah, he can also, score 25 to 27 points a game. He can handle the rock. He can shoot. He can stretch the floor. Yeah, there's not really any other argument you can make other than this guy being the number 1 player the face of the league. And I have had my top 7 as MVP candidates, but Wemby could win 3 of the next 5 MVPs for all that I know. I can't say that about any of the other players that they are capable of winning 3 of the 5 next MVPs. That I ain't capable of saying about Wembanyama. I think the gap between 1 and 2 is pretty distinct for best NBA player in 5 years. And Wemby just being the clear-cut number 1. So, yeah, that's. I mean, I don't. There's not really much I can say in terms of defense. The argument makes itself.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. The gap between 1 and 2. I think it's easiest to predict Wemby at 1, just with what he's accomplished and what everyone believes him to be. But I think from a talent perspective, I do think Cade and Luka are just as talented as Wemby. So from a prediction standpoint and a player build standpoint, I agree with you. The gap is significant. But I think from a talent standpoint, all these guys in the top, really in like the top 8, I think are very similar talent-wise. A couple guys that neither one of us mentioned that I thought honestly were going to be on your list. 2 guys come to mind, Deni Avdija and Alperen Şengün. Neither one of them were mentioned by either of us. And I'm not high on either of them, which is why I didn't have them on the list. But Şengün has always been called Baby Jokic, and Jokic was like a late bloomer into his prime. So if we saw a similar trajectory for Şengün, wouldn't surprise me. Like, wouldn't be the most surprising thing. And then Deni Avdija just had the best year of his career, and he's still very young. So those are 2 guys that I thought you might mention on your list.
Yeah. Şengün, I mean, I consider both of them. They were both of my honorable mentions. Şengün is a playoff choker, whereas Jokic is a playoff riser. Şengün has disappeared in the playoffs, and really the only thing he can do is bully ball, right? We've talked about him as a baby Jokic, but his pointer has not improved at all from where it was. I mean, I'm going to look up his numbers right now, but I don't think Alperen Şengün's 3-point numbers are at all that impressive last year. Deni Avdija, yes, he just had the best year of his career, but he will be 30 years old in the year 2031. And he is somebody that his game is based a lot on foul baiting and getting to the free throw line. True. And players whose games are based around that don't tend to age as well in the NBA. They just don't have the ability to beat their man and get the easy foul call that they did when they were 27, 28 years old, and a lot more explosive than they were when they hit 30 years old. You look at James Harden, that's a guy's game that has declined. Even Trae Young's game hasn't particularly aged great. That is, a reason that I had Jalen Brunson as an honorable mention, and I think Avdija falls into that same category. Shea, I think, is too developed offensively and too good of a shot maker that, even if he's not getting to the line as much, he will still be close to 30 points per game as an average. I mean, I know people like to call Shea a foul baiter, but dude is still an absolute bucket. Avdija is, I think over half of his points last year came at the free throw line. I think that was an actual statistic. So this is somebody that half of his offense is getting to the free throw line. Yeah, I'm not really buying it. 5 years down the road. And yeah, Şengün last year, he shot 30% from 3-point range. The year before, he shot 23%. 23. So this is not somebody that is a particularly potent jump shooter at all. That's kind of something you need to be Baby Jokic. You need to be able to stretch the floor and make the defense worry about guarding your center from the perimeter. And Şengün is more of he's almost a traditional 90s post-up center is what he's become at this stage in his career. He could develop it later, obviously, that's possible, but from what I've seen the last 2 years of Şengün, I have definitely viewed his ceiling a lot lower than what it was.
Yeah. And I didn't have either one of them on my list, but those were 2 guys that you didn't mention that I thought of. Because obviously I had Jalen Johnson and VJ in my honorable mentions as well, but you had them in your list. Anyone else you want to mention that could maybe make this list that we didn't even talk about?
I'm just going to rattle through all my honorable mentions real quick, see if there's any names that stick out to you as interesting. These are players that I all considered for one reason or another to be top 20. And by the way, All-Stars are 24 to 25 players. So 4 players on these honorable mentions will still be All-Star caliber players, right? So with that being said, my honorable mentions are Cam Boozer, Denny Abia, Alperen Sengun, Jalen Williams, Jalen Brown, Colin Knippel, Evan Mobley, Paulo Banchero, LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton, Amen Thompson, Jalen Brunson, Donovan Mitchell, Malik Thomas, and 2 players that haven't even played college yet, in Tyron Stokes and Marcus Spears Jr. Rounds out my honorable mentions.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, a lot of your honorable mentions I made the case for, just because I wasn't very rookie heavy in this draft or in this ranking. But I look at my list and I just think to myself, these rookies are going to have to be what we expect them to be and more to crack the top 10, I think. Like top 20, I think some of them could crack for sure, and there'll be arguments for guys. But I think like for AJ, Peterson, Boozer, Wilson, Acuff, anyone you want to make the argument for, they're going to have to reach their floor and then some to be a top 10 player in the league in 5 years, just with the list I have in front of me. Because like Wemby, Cade, Ant not going anywhere. Luka not going anywhere. Giannis, in my opinion, is not going anywhere as a top 10 player. Shea not going anywhere. We both see Cooper Flag as a top 10 player in 5 years. So that leaves very little room for these guys to jump into the top 10, top 15. And I just think, I don't want to say their expectations are too high, but it feels like we have set the bar for these kids extremely high. And I would be a little shocked if most of them met that bar.
Yeah, we have set a really high bar, admittedly. We've called this class generationally good. We've compared it to the 2003 class, right? But LeBron and Dwayne Wade were both not just top 10, arguably top 5 players by not even 5 years down the road. By the time they hit year 3, both of them were arguably top 5 players in the league. Wade won a Finals MVP in year 3, whereas LeBron, I think, averaged 30 points, right? So it's not completely unheard of for these guys to break out, especially when the class is this potent. And I'm not saying DeBonsa is even going to be an MVP candidate. I have him ranked number 9. Right? I think he could be All-NBA 5 years down the road. But like you said, I do think the guys that are in MVP talks now or are going to be next year are not guys that are going to go anywhere or get worse 5 years down the road. It is crowded at the top, but I do think this class is good enough that they can break through. I mean, this isn't 2024 where we have Risha Shea and Alex Sarr as long-term developmental projects, right? This is Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, Caleb Wilson, who are freak athletes and average 20 points a game in the summer league, average 20 points a game in college, and just look like generational players, at least on the offensive side of the ball, if not, in Caleb Wilson's case, on both sides of the ball. So, yes, we have set the bar high, but there's a reason the bar has been set this high to begin with. Just because of how good this draft class is.
Absolutely. No, I completely hear you there. And this draft class, I hope, lives up to the hype, because if so, the NBA just got a whole lot better in one year. So, yeah. Looking forward to this season. This season's going to be awesome.
It is. The Rookie of the Year race this year is what I'm going to be following definitely more intently than in years past, just because there's so many plausible candidates that could emerge as contenders. And by the way, there's going to be guys in 5 years that emerge that didn't even make honorable mentions, right? It happens every year. Mm-hmm. Somebody breaks out and makes their first All-Star or their first All-NBA that nobody expected in years past. So yeah, these lists, these honorable mentions are not definitive. They are unlikely to be right. It's just going to be very interesting. 5 years down the road, come back and see this video and see how well it aged.
One name that fits that criteria perfectly that I can just think of is Keontae George. Like, what if Keontae George turns into what we think Peterson is? Then he's a top 20 player in the league. And he's a guy we didn't even mention either. So, and talk about a chip on his shoulder. I mean, they just drafted his replacement. Talk about chip on your shoulder. Keontae George, keep balling. Because this guy, whether it's with Utah or not, somebody's going to want you. I promise.
Yeah, and Alex Sarr, for example, another guy, 7 foot, tantalizing potential on both ends of the floor. He kind of had a disappointing rookie season. He had a much better second year, but not a season that's going to say, oh, yeah, this guy is all-star, all-NBA talent, like they did when he was coming into the league. but you never know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that he's playing with a strong supporting cast, with a actual point guard in Trae Young, with a number one option in Debansa, with a guy like Anthony Davis who can take off some of the defensive responsibilities from him. This is a guy that could break out next year, right? He could be an all-star as soon as next year. We don't know. It's just what makes these kind of lists very interesting to see who we completely missed, who was completely off of our radar at this time. So, again, yeah, something to keep an eye on. These lists are not going to be right. This is not a definitive ranking of all the players that'll be in consideration.
No, it is definitely not definitive. And like Alex said at the beginning, these lists will be wrong. 100%. They like no chance they're not wrong. So, excited to see where we land in like 2 years. See if we're like anywhere close to what we think is happening in the league.
Yeah, but that'll wrap up this episode of the Hoopers Lounge. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave down below whose list between Max and mine you like better. Between our top 7, which aside from Jokic was all the same, do you guys agree with that top 7 as kind of the consensus best? Or do you guys think there's another player that could join those ranks in the next 5 years? Let us know down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And until next time, we'll see you all.
Peace out.
Peace.